Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Al-Nikah Diaries, and the first diary entry of 2025 is titled Sugar Mommy. So let's get into it, inshallah. Now, whenever we take a nikah inquiry, the first question, or one of the first questions that we ask, is how old are both the bride and groom? And generally speaking, we get honest responses from people at the other end of the phone. They'll tell us whether or not they're, 20, 25, 30, however old they may be. However, on occasion, we get questions that are a little bit, responses that are a little bit more elusive to our questions. And this is one of those occasions. So the young lady that's on the other end of the phone, let's just say her name is Hind, calls, asks about our nikah services and whether we'd be willing to perform her nikah. So as we do, we ask, how old are you and the intended groom, to which she replies that, well, I'm significantly older than him. She doesn't tell us the age, her age, or the intended partner's age. She just says that there's a bit of an age gap. To which point we ask, well, how big of an age gap are we talking? And it's always a bit of I suppose, a bit of a red flag when people aren't open initially with the response to the question. And although we understand that there's perhaps a feeling of shame, or perhaps a feeling of embarrassment, or perhaps a feeling that the person at the other end of the phone that you don't know is going to judge you. So we take all of that into account. We understand all of that, and we're conscious to all of that. But still, we need to understand the age ranges, or the age gaps between bride and groom, because this leads into multiple other conversations, as other videos in this series will tell you, and also as this video will highlight to you as well, inshallah. So after some conversation, she tells us that she's in her mid-40s. So Hind is in her mid-40s. But the chap that she wants to marry is in his late teens and early 20s, coming into 19, 20, 21, that kind of age bracket. So the question for us then is, okay, alhamdulillah, that although there's not principally anything wrong with that, how have you arrived at a situation where you're courting a teenager coming into his 20s for marriage? How has that happened? And generally speaking, when people get into the later stages of their life, into late 30s, early 40s, into their 50s, they generally tend to find partners, or are exiting relationships. So, sister, have you ever been married before? And she tells us, yes, I've been married. I was married up until recently. The relationship that I was in lasted X number of years. I have 3 children from that relationship as well. However, my ex-partner was abusive and I couldn't stay with him anymore. So I was able, and I managed to exit that relationship, alhamdulillah. Thereafter, I spent a little bit of time on my own and was introduced to this young man who happens to be from another part of the world. Let's just say somewhere in the Indian subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, from that part of the world. And we've been getting on speaking for a number of weeks, and we've decided that we want to get married. Okay, so Sister Hind, how long have you been speaking to this man for? So let's just say this man's name is Khalid. How long have you been speaking to Khalid for? So Hind says that, listen, we've been talking for about 3 or 4 weeks now. And we get on really well. We spend all day on the phone to one another. He tells me that he loves me and that he wants to take care of me. He tells me that he knows that I have children, but that's not a problem for him, and that he will love my children like his own, and that he will provide for them, and that he will care for them, and that he will tell me basically everything that I want from a man and from a relationship he is willing to offer. Now, that may be the case. That may be the case, or it might not be the case, and it might just be the case that Khalid is seeing an opportunity within Hind, the kind of opportunity perhaps that he wouldn't get anywhere else, because Hind is a passport holder of a certain European country. Hind is an opportunity for him perhaps to escape from the life that he's living into a life that he thinks he wants. And he very much sees Hind as a vehicle to achieve that. And the question that I had to ask Hind, and these are all the things that are kind of going on in the back of my mind, and I think, well, hold on, if you've been in a relationship that's been abusive and you've managed to escape that, recognizing that it's not been particularly long since you've exited that relationship, you're moving into a new relationship with a man that you don't really know, you've met remotely through, various forums and friends and all the rest of it, is from a different part of the world, a different country, different culture, different context, is so much younger than you, arguably only a few years older than your children. What makes you think that this is the right move for you? What makes you think that this is the right decision to make? What makes you think that this person has actually got your best interests at heart? So how do you know that this person has your best interests at heart? And after 3 or 4 weeks of conversing via, whether it's talk, text, video, whatever it may be, how do you determine whether or not this person actually loves you? How do you make that assessment? And if I'm to be bold, and this was something that I did ask the sister, if I'm to be bold, why would somebody who is in the prime of their youth, 19, 20, 21 years old, want to marry somebody who is middle-aged with 3 children and all of the responsibilities that brings? Now, it doesn't make sense to me. Perhaps, if they were lovers for argument's sake, or they had a romantic relationship when they were 17, 18, 19 years old for argument's sake, and they ended up going different ways, and then they met back up after 20 or 30 years, he may want to continue to take on that relationship or that responsibility, if things had fallen differently. But this is very, very different. This is someone that you've just taken on, that you've just been introduced to, you've met, and is willing to assume all of this responsibility on the basis of a notion of love that he's communicated to you, saying that he feels for you after a period of 3 or 4 weeks. How does it happen? How does it happen? And unfortunately, the sister wasn't able to convince me that it was the right decision to make in her interests, and I wasn't able to make that or perform that nikah with the reassurance and the peace of mind that I need, that we're doing the right thing for everybody involved. And everybody involved is the groom, is the bride, and also in this case those 3 children that the lady has responsibilities for. And often what we see, particularly in relationships that have broken down in such a way that people carry so much emotional turmoil, emotional baggage and scars, that they don't necessarily know how to deal with that and how to heal from that, particularly if they've been married, as this lady had been, for 15 or 20 years, has had multiple children from that relationship, but has suffered significant and varying degrees of abuse within that. You can't just switch that off. How do you deal with that? How do you address that? And in this situation, what appears to have happened is that there's been somebody who's seen an opportunity lurking on the outside, who has been willing to take on, whether you want to refer to it as, or perhaps exploit that opportunity for potentially their own personal gains. And that's the only real reading that I could get from the situation. But this sister was willing to be, for want of a better expression, the sugar mummy for this young man. And this is recognizing that she herself wasn't particularly well or financially established, but she was a gateway. And I think she probably knew this within her mind's heart. Excuse me. That she actually knew this, that he was potentially really only interested in her for what she could bring to him and what she could offer him in terms of passport, in terms of opportunity, in terms of transitioning out of the culture that he was in to a different culture, and the metaphorical roads paved with gold here in the UK. And she'd resigned to the possibility that was the case, and she was quite comfortable in accepting that and willing to be that for him in order for him, or in order for her to have him, which is really remarkable in my mind. And in doing so, you risk sacrificing the relationship that you have with your children for the purposes of short-term material stroke immaterial gain. What a crazy world it is. And often when we think about exploitation, we don't necessarily think about women that are of later years. We think about particularly young children or young teens. And we don't necessarily think about the fact that there could be people, whoever they may be, wherever they may be in the world, of a certain age, that are willing to enter into relationships with women and people who are significantly older for the purposes of their own financial gain. May Allah forgive us. May He protect us, inshallah ta'ala aziz.